For centuries, Russia has loomed over Europe as both a mysterious neighbor and a formidable rival. From its vast, frigid lands to its immense military power, it has often been seen not just as another state, but as a force of nature, sometimes unpredictable, sometimes unrelenting. In recent years, events such as the annexation of Crimea, the war in Ukraine, and displays of military strength have reignited old anxieties. For some Europeans, the fear comes from the sheer size of Russia's army and its nuclear arsenal. For others, it's about political influence, energy dependence, and the memory of past conflicts. This fear is not new, it's rooted in centuries of history, shaped by wars, rivalries, and ideological battles. To understand why Europe fears Russia today, we have to look at the long shadow it has cast over the continent's past. Russia's relationship with Europe has been marked by a mix of fascination and apprehension since the earliest encounters. In the medieval era, it stood on the fringes of European civilization, distant and enigmatic, yet large enough to unsettle the balance of power. As the Tsardom of Russia expanded, its reach grew into Eastern Europe, swallowing up territories and pressing against the borders of established kingdoms. By the time of the Napoleonic Wars, Russia had proven itself as a decisive military force, capable of both withstanding and defeating one of Europe's greatest conquerors. The 19th century only deepened the unease. Russia's influence spread through the Balkans and Central Asia, challenging Ottoman control and, by extension, European strategic interests. To the west, this expansion was often viewed not as the natural growth of a nation, but as the steady advance of an unstoppable giant, one that could one day dominate the whole continent. The image of Russia as a great bear lumbering toward Europe became one of the most enduring symbols of geopolitical fear. In the 19th century, political cartoons across Britain, France, and other European powers depicted the Russian Empire as a hulking beast, powerful, relentless, and always hungry for more territory. This was not just an artistic flourish. It reflected a deeply ingrained belief that Russia's size and ambitions made it inherently threatening. The bear symbol carried a dual meaning. On one hand, it evoked brute strength and resilience, a creature difficult to stop once in motion. On the other, it suggested something untamed and unpredictable, acting according to its own instincts rather than the rules of diplomacy. Over time, this imagery seeped into political discourse, reinforcing the notion that Russia was not merely another nation-state but a force that had to be contained, watched, and, if necessary, confronted. Throughout the 19th century, Russia's imperial ambitions brought it into frequent collision with European powers, feeding the perception of an ever-present threat. The Crimean War, fought between Russia and an alliance of Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire, was seen as a stark warning of how far Russian influence could reach if unchecked. In the Balkans, Russia's repeated interventions during the Russo-Turkish Wars alarmed the great powers, as control over the region meant access to the Mediterranean and a potential challenge to British and French maritime dominance. Even when cloaked in the language of protecting Orthodox Christians or liberating oppressed peoples, Russian advances were often interpreted in Europe as strategic moves to expand its power. Diplomats feared not only the vast armies of the Tsar, but also the slow, patient way in which Russia seemed to advance, creeping into new territories, consolidating its hold, and then pushing further still. To many in Europe, the Tsarist state was less a neighbor and more a shadow that steadily lengthened over the continent. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 transformed Russia from an imperial monarchy into a communist state, replacing the Tsars, crowned with the Red Star. For Europe, this was not just a change of government, but the birth of a new and dangerous ideology that promised to spread beyond Russia's borders. The early Soviet years were marked by open calls for worldwide revolution, alarming monarchies and democracies alike. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union became an uneasy ally, fighting alongside Britain, France, and later the United States against Nazi Germany. Yet even in victory, distrust remained. The Red Army's occupation of Eastern Europe was seen less as liberation and more as the establishment of a Soviet sphere of influence. The Cold War that followed turned fear into a constant reality. Nuclear missiles, espionage, propaganda, and proxy wars kept Europe on edge for decades. The USSR was no longer just a neighbor. It was an ideological adversary with the means to destroy the continent in minutes, a presence that shaped every major political and military decision in Europe for nearly half a century. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 seemed, at first, to mark the end of Europe's long-standing fears. Russia emerged weakened, its economy in turmoil, its military struggling, and its influence sharply reduced. For much of the 1990s, the threat it posed appeared distant, replaced by uncertainty over whether the country could hold itself together. But the early 2000s brought a shift. Under Vladimir Putin, Russia began to recover its strength, modernizing its armed forces, consolidating political power, and reasserting itself on the global stage. The war's insignia signaled a willingness to use force to maintain territorial integrity, while growing control over energy resources gave Moscow leverage over European economies. Gradually, the West's perception changed from seeing Russia as a fading power to recognizing it as a resurgent one, no longer ideologically communist but still strategically assertive, and perhaps even more unpredictable without the rigid framework of Cold War rules. Several moments in the 21st century turned simmering concern about Russia back into active fear across Europe. In 2008, the brief but decisive war with Georgia demonstrated Moscow's readiness to use military force beyond its borders, challenging the post-Cold War order. The 2014 annexation of Crimea shocked the continent, marking the first major withdrawing of European borders by force since the Second World War and triggering fears of further territorial ambitions. Support for separatists in eastern Ukraine, coupled with military exercises near NATO's frontiers, deepened the sense of vulnerability among Russia's neighbors. Then, in 2022, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine transformed unease into outright alarm, shattering decades of assumptions about European security. Each of these flashpoints reminded Europe that Russia was not just a distant player, but a powerful neighbor willing to reshape its surroundings through force, with consequences that could spill far beyond its immediate borders. Europe's fear of Russia is not only rooted in history or recent military actions, but also in the practical realities of power and dependence. Russia possesses one of the largest and most modernized nuclear arsenals in the world, a deterrent that underpins its geopolitical confidence and limits how far opponents are willing to push back. Its conventional forces, honed through years of reforms and combat experience, are capable of rapid mobilization, especially along Europe's eastern frontier. At the same time, Europe's energy needs have long given Moscow a powerful lever. For years, Russian natural gas and oil flowed into the homes, factories, and power grids of European nations, creating a relationship where economic ties doubled as strategic vulnerabilities. Disputes over prices or transit routes have, in the past, left parts of Europe literally in the cold, reinforcing the idea that Russia's influence is not confined to the battlefield. Together, its military strength and control over vital resources form a combination that makes Russia a uniquely challenging and potentially dangerous neighbor. Europe's response to Russia is far from unified, and these divisions shape how the continent confronts the perceived threat. Eastern European nations such as Poland and the Baltic states, with memories of Soviet domination still fresh, tend to favor strong deterrence and closer ties with NATO, viewing Moscow as an immediate danger. In contrast, some Western and Southern European countries have historically leaned toward diplomatic engagement, arguing that dialogue and economic cooperation can prevent escalation. Energy dependence, trade interests, and domestic politics often influence these stances, creating friction within the European Union and NATO over how forcefully to act. The result is a patchwork of policies, some pushing for sanctions and military buildup, others for negotiation and compromise. This lack of consensus not only complicates collective action, but also offers Russia opportunities to exploit divisions, making it harder for Europe to present a truly united front beyond tanks and missiles. Russia's influence in Europe also operates in the shadows, using methods that blur the line between war and peace. State-backed media outlets, social networks, and covert influence campaigns have been accused of spreading disinformation to deepen political divides, erode trust in democratic institutions, and amplify extremist voices. Cyberattacks on government agencies, infrastructure, and private companies have demonstrated a capacity to disrupt daily life without firing a shot. These operations are often deniable, carried out through proxies or masked by digital anonymity, making them difficult to counter directly. Alongside this, Russia employs hybrid tactics combining economic pressure, intelligence operations, and military posturing to keep adversaries off balance. Such strategies are designed not to conquer territory outright, but to weaken an opponent's resolve from within, leaving European societies vulnerable in ways traditional armies cannot easily defend against. Europe's fear of Russia is not born from a single moment or policy, but from centuries of encounters that have blended history, memory, and present-day reality. From the march of imperial armies to the ideological battles of the Cold War and the sudden shocks of modern conflicts, Russia has consistently been a force that Europe cannot ignore. Some of this fear is rooted in genuine strategic concerns: military strength, nuclear weapons, and the willingness to use force, while some is shaped by perception, propaganda, and the long shadow of the past. Whether justified or exaggerated, the anxiety influences how Europe prepares, reacts, and debates its future security. The question that remains is not whether Russia will continue to shape Europe's thinking, but whether the continent can respond with unity and foresight, or if old divisions will allow history's patterns to repeat themselves once again.